Hey there, super friends. This is Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018. If you want to connect with us on social media, you can friend up our Last Point Gaming Facebook account. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, Last Point Gaming. You can follow us on Twitter at Last Point Gaming. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Stranger Sparrow, or you can always reach out directly with an email to lastpointgaming@gmail.com. Alright, I think that's the best it's been since we included the YouTube. Anyway, as promised, today I'm going to talk all about this fascinating old game that I had never played before, Battletech. This is one of those old dead card games that the Epidemic specializes in. If you watch any of the videos on his YouTube channel, most, if not all of them, start with, hey, this is the Epidemic and I'm living in the past. That's the joy he gets from gaming, is playing these, old games he remembers from his youth and, just kind of recapturing some of that less burdened time in our lives, I know back when I was 19, I thought, it didn't get any worse than that, and, this adulting thing was hard. And here I am 15 years later, and adulting is still hard. But now I got a mortgage, a bunch of kids, and a real job. Just all kinds of responsibilities that I never thought I'd ever have back then. And if you go even younger, I started gaming when I was in high school. At that point, man, pretty much my sole responsibility my freshman year of high school was to get through the day. So he really has a love of these old games. And of course, back then, he hung around the game store when he was in high school. I didn't discover the guild until, I think, shortly after I graduated high school. So, I gamed with the guys in my shop out at Tech, but I didn't know there was this whole world of things. So I missed out on a lot of stuff. So in that respect, it's actually kind of neat gaming with him and husband. Now I think about it, I don't know if Epidemic is closer to husband's age or mine. Weird. I mean, husband's only a couple years older than I am, but, the age gap between us is an entire high school career, I guess. Anyway, none of that matters. So, luckily, husband played a lot of these games back in his younger days, too, so he's usually able to, provide some kind of help in instruction, because he remembers bits and pieces, just maybe not the finer points of the rules. Whereas I'm kind of the odd man out here, I guess, in that, I didn't play any of these games. I didn't play Mythos. I did play a crap ton of Jihad. Loved that game. Which later became Vampire: The Internal Struggle due to some merger and acquisition bullshit, losing rights for the name Jihad or whatever. I never played Rage, but I knew of it. And, prior to Epidemic bringing it up, I'd never even heard of Battletech. I have to say, it's a pretty neat card game. Out of all the old dead card games we play, it seems the most well-constructed, aside from possibly Jihad. Jihad was around for, a few years. I've talked before about when we've played Mythos, and I have recently experienced an uptick in listeners, so you may not have been around for that. Mythos is this really old dead card game based on the lore and universe created by H.P. Lovecraft. It's also utilized by the role-playing game Call of Cthulhu. Cthulhu is one of Lovecraft's creations. So, the problem with that game, however, is it didn't last long, at all. It was a flash-in-the-pan game. there was a period of time where, like, everything had a TCG, and just so many of them failed within, like, I don't know, the first set release. Like, they just never got a second set. Some of them made it a little bit longer. Mythos, well, I would have to ask the experts on that one, but I want to say it had, like, 3 or 4 sets. Because there was, like, the standard set, there was New Aeon, and I remember that one because, like, there's weird interactions. There's weird interactions between New Aeon cards and, like, old cards, so, like, we had a house rule, something to do with New Aeon cards. Because that was the most recent set before the game died. So the cards are a bit higher of a power level, but anyway, all neither here nor there. That game becomes really difficult to play because it didn't live long enough for the rules to really be fleshed out. So there's, like, all kinds of questionable things that you're like, depending on how you look at it, and it's subjective. And there's still, like, a cult following for this game. There's actually a Facebook group that Epidemic invited husband and I to, where people still talk about it, but there's not a lot of rules clarifications. Whereas Battletech was actually made by Wizards of the Coast. You can strongly see the hand of John Garfield on the... Not John. Jeez, what? What am I doing today? What am I doing with my life? You can strongly see the hand of Richard Garfield on the game. Which actually made this one of the easier ones for me to pick up. Rage and Mythos, both... Mythos actually wasn't too terribly bad as far as the basics. Rage, I had all sorts of trouble with, which is kind of surprising because, like, I played Werewolf the Apocalypse, so, I mean, I get the basic structure of the world. I guess, like, turn sequence and stuff I was having trouble with. Whereas Battletech, you can really equate most of the things in it to something in Magic. And it made it a lot easier for me to pick up. So, the basics of the game, your library is your life total. Once you run out of cards in library, unlike Magic, if you run out of cards in your library, you don't actually lose the game until you would have to draw a card and cannot. So, either a spell causing you to draw a card, or, you know, your draw step. Whereas with Battletech, I believe they said that as soon as you are out of cards in library, that's it, you're done. And that's how your opponents defeat you, is they attack your library. Now, they can attack other things. So, this is one of those games where, from a combat view, I would equate it more to Legend of the Five Rings than Magic. Because it's not like Magic where you just attack and then... Well, I mean, I guess with the addition of Planeswalkers, that's kind of similar. So, you have different zones. I'm trying to, like, explain this in a sequence that makes sense, but of course this is kind of difficult as this is all verbal and I don't have any of the stuff in front of me. And this was all the way back on Saturday night, and y'all know how my memory works. It's not great. So, we determined that you started the game with 7 cards. I don't know how we came to that conclusion. I remember there was a discussion about it. The boys just said we start with 7, and I just followed orders. Every turn you draw 2 cards, not 1. And your turn sequence goes untap, no upkeep. Well, no upkeep at that point. Draw. Then, before you start what is essentially your main phase, if you have the R letter, which is, I think, repair and reload, on any of your resources, there are a lot of things dictated by, like, these 5, I think it's 5 different letters, that can be on your resources. And they are L for logistics, P for politics, R for repair reload, M for mission, maybe? Sounds right? And A for... I don't remember. I have no clue what the hell A stands for. So if you have resources that have repair reload, you can tap a resource to heal 1 point of damage on one of your mechs. Which seems weird. Like, I kind of want to look into this because I feel like you should be able to tap all your resources with R to heal points of damage, but I don't know. This is what I was told. Doesn't matter how many resources you have with the letter R on them, as long as it is one or more, you get to do this once. Then you move on to your main phase. And in your main phase, you can deploy up to 2 new cards into the battlefield. And you deploy them in your deployment zone face down. What you use your resources for are to tap to add counters to things in your face down deployment zone. Or your face down, deployment, I think. I don't know. This game's, okay, it's a little bit confusing to explain. It's a lot simpler when you're playing. You put counters on things until you equal the cost. Now, resources have a cost of 0. So technically you deploy them face down, but then they immediately turn face up and enter your command zone. And just like lands, you can use them the turn they come out. Things in your deployment zone that are upside down that you're putting counters on, you have to pay at least the amount of counters equal to the cost, but there are certain things that allow you to keep putting extra counters on, and then when you turn it up, it's kind of like multi-kicker. There's an extra effect for however many counters you have on it. This is another place those 5 letters factor in, because a lot of the mechs, which is mostly what you spend time building in your deployment zone, will have one number and then have one or more other numbers accompanied by one of these letters. So, like, if your mech cost is 3, 2A, 2T, then it costs you 3 if you have a resource with a T and a resource with an A on it. If you only have the resource with the T, you have to pay that extra number attached to the A. Again, I know it sounds complex, but it's not, like, if you look at the cards. Maybe I shouldn't be getting into the whole details of how to play or anything, but we've already started down this road, so we're just going to keep going. Once you flip a mech up, as long as you're still in your main phase, there's a different name for it, but that's what it is. It's basically your main phase. It stays in your deployment zone until you move to what is essentially your combat phase. It's like your strategy phase or some shit like that. And then you can deploy them to the patrol area. So mechs, once they're out and about and the summoning sickness has worn off, you can either leave them in the patrol area, which means when your opponents attack in, there are 3 speeds of mech. There are slow, medium, and fast. Fast mechs can intercept anything. Medium can only intercept medium and slow. Slow can only intercept slow. So when your opponents attack at you, if you have a mech of the same speed or better in your patrol zone, you can go intercept the attack. Now, if you have to go intercept the attack, you have to tap your blocker. One of the things you can do the turn after a new mech has been deployed to the patrol zone from your deployment zone, unless there are a couple mechs with a keyword that is essentially haste that you can assign them right away. They go right from your deployment zone to where you want them to be. But the next turn, after it's been in the patrol zone during your upkeep, you can assign it to specific places to guard. So your opponent can attack your library, which is your stockpile, I think. I don't know. It's a library. They can attack things you have under construction. They attack a specific card, basically, on the battlefield. Or, yeah, on the battlefield. The whole thing's the battlefield. So they can choose to attack one of your face-down things in your deployment zone. They can attack your resources individually. So resources are kind of like your mana, your lands. So it's kind of like they can attack your mountain directly. Yeah. So that's all the things they can attack. So you can assign mechs that you've built to guard a specific place, and then they don't tap to block. Because they didn't have to move. They're just chilling out, waiting for somebody to come rumble. Now, each mech has a power, how hard it hits, an armor class, and then hit points. So, their armor, like if your mech hits for 2, has an armor of 3, and 7 hit points. If an attack doesn't do more than 3 points of damage, there's no damage marked on the mech. But if your opponent deals 4 damage to that mech, it goes through its 3 armor, and then it gets a damage marker on it, a wound counter essentially. And then once the wound counters on it equal or exceed its hit points, it goes to the scrap heap, which is your graveyard. So this is a weird game to play 3-way. The guys kept commenting that it was weird to try to do the 3-way game. Because I'm just like sitting there Rube Goldberging it up, building mechs and shit, and I'm not attacking anybody because I only kind of know what's going on. And they keep slamming into each other, and then they'll come slam at me for a little bit. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. The other type of card you have, well, two more types, are pilots. Pilots are kind of like equipment for your mech, with an equip cost of 0. Once you're able to deploy them, you just put them in a mech, and then like during your main phase, each turn, you can move them from mech to mech. But I think you can only do that like during your main phase. And mission cards. Mission cards are kind of like the instants and sorceries. They affect combat usually. So like, and they'll say the timing that they have to be played, like, you know, play when you're being attacked, play when you are attacking. And like, I had one that was, I think it was called Into the Bog. So Epidemic came at me with a bunch of fast mechs because all my mechs floating around in my patrol zone are all slow. And he came at, I think, one of my resource cards. Because the L resource, its special ability is during your end step, you can restock one card, which means you can take one card from your hand and put it on the bottom of your library, essentially healing 1 point of damage. Because again, when you run out of cards, you lose. So he started trying to attack all my logistic resources, because really any card that like I couldn't really understand based on my understanding of the game, I just kept chucking them back on the bottom of my library because I didn't want to keep slowing things down by like, these words do not make sense in this order. So he started going after my logistics resources so that I would stop building my library back up. So he declares his attack. Now, here's the other neat thing when it comes to your combat. You declare an attack in a place in which mechs are attacking. Then your opponent declares blockers, you have the combat. Then if you have mechs that have not yet attacked, you declare the next wave of attackers. You don't declare all your attacks at once. Which is where the real strategy comes in. You don't want to overcommit blocks, especially, you know, things that are hanging out in your patrol zone, because they have to tap to go block. So if they're sending in one mech, you don't want to send in all your stuff to block them, because then you're leaving yourself wide open if they have more. So he comes at me, I throw out my Into the Bog so that I can now block his fast mech with my big-ass slow mechs. And of course, one of the main differences between fast and slow mechs tend to do less damage and have less hit points, whereas slow mechs tend to hit harder and have more hit points and armor. And, it makes sense if you think about it from, like, a real-life war machine, war vehicle point of view. The more armor and artillery you have, the heavier the vehicle is, the slower it moves. So I was able to pretty much demolish these fast mechs because they're not really great at taking on slow mechs. And he only sent a couple in because, the armor class and hit points on my resource building were so low, and it didn't look like I could block them. So I got the smashy smash, and that was awesome. And that's basically how the game works. This is not a game you're going to find at your LGS. This is going to be something you're likely going to have to dig around on eBay to find, or find somebody that still has their collection from way back when. Though apparently there is a hobby shop in the area here that still sells Battletech. You go, Pastimes, you go. But yeah, it was a pretty fun game. This is the kind of unfortunate thing when we play games with Epidemic, is we're either playing board games, which are newer or more relevant, or we're playing old dead card games that, I like to talk about them because they're kind of neat and there's not a lot of content out there about them because a lot of them died before the real age of the internet. But this isn't check out this cool new game. This is check out this neat, obscure thing. It was a pretty fun game. Somehow I ended up winning, but I think we hit the point in the night that the first time you play a game, it's always rough because you gotta explain everything, and there's all kinds of, oh crap, well, how does that work? I don't know, I guess we're gonna have to look it up. And, all that, and it drags it out longer. Whereas I think the next time we play, there will be a lot more strategy and tactic involved. And it won't come down to pretty much everybody Epidemic took a full swing at Husband and nearly knocked him out of the game, but he tapped down all his stuff to do it, so then come my turn, it was easy enough just to take out Husband and take out Epidemic in the same turn. So, I think that's how it went down. I don't know. Maybe Epidemic ended up winning. I don't really remember, because by that point we were all kind of fried. Saturday was, of course, a very long day. I had to get up early to be at the shop early to help with, judgy stuff, setting up for the PPTQ. Then ended up playing in the PPTQ. Then, got home, got everybody fed. And I think we had to, run to Target or some trash like that. Yeah, so it was a long day. So by the time we're wrapping up this game, it's, after midnight, going on 1 o'clock. And we're all just kind of okay, this was fun and all, but it kind of needs to stop now. So I'm excited to check this one out again and, maybe get to talk about it again. I think this would be one of those ones, it'd be great if Epidemic did a video on it on his YouTube channel, or, if one of the nights he comes over, we set up a camera and, we do a video of the gameplay, because it'll make a lot more sense. But again, you gotta really look for these cards. You don't just generally stumble across them. Though that being said, I have a billion boxes of the old Star Wars card game cards. One of the Star Wars card game cards. Apparently there were 5. Because my mother-in-law randomly came across them and was like, hey, you guys do card stuff? Here's all these cards. And we got real excited for a minute until we saw they were all Star Wars cards. And we just still haven't gotten around to cataloging them all and seeing if any of them are worth anything. But I got a bunch of those, so I don't know, you may come across these cards randomly at a yard sale or a flea market or something, but it is not a new up-and-coming game. It's a game that for some reason didn't last, which, I mean, a lot of these old card games I can, pick out reasons why they didn't last. This one, I don't really know why. It seems pretty well developed, being that it didn't last terribly long. It has a good rules base, easy to understand. The cards are easy to understand. It's not like, Mythos cards where you're like, what the fuck does that even mean? So it's kind of a shame it didn't last. But it was a fun game to play, and I needed content to talk about this week. So there you have it. Tomorrow, probably going to talk a little bit about what I'm looking at for black-white vampires for standard. Or I may dig through legacy lists tonight and start setting up everything I need for this X-Mage League. So yeah, throughout the rest of the week, it's probably going to be mostly standard decks, but may talk a little bit about Legacy too. Exciting thing tomorrow on the Versus series, I think they're doing Legacy. I think Legacy's tomorrow and Vintage is Thursday, so hey, if you're into Vintage, because you never see that, Versus video will be up on YouTube under the Star City Games channel. But I'm interested to watch tomorrow because this week it's Ross Merriam and Todd Anderson doing the Versus videos. So I'm hoping Ross picks something that at least seems kind of up my alley for Legacy. Because I know I can't depend on Todd Anderson to do that. Because every deck that man plays is blue something. And not like, well, there are some good cards in blue, but it doesn't really do the blue thing. No, he does the blue thing. So, anyway, that's where we're at. I'm in my driveway now. As always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to y'all tomorrow.